Welcome. My name is Jamie Chin Han, and I'm a clinical pharmacotherapy specialist at NYU Langone, Long Island in hematology oncology. I'm also the president of the New York City Society of Health Systems Pharmacists.
And my name is Angela Chang Lai. I am a clinical pharmacy manager at Montefiore Medical Center, and I'm also the president-elect at the New York State Council of Health System Pharmacists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ruth Cassidy. I am Senior Vice President of Clinical Support Services and Chief Pharmacy Officer at St. Barnabas Hospital, SBH Health System, and I'm the President of the New York State Council of Health System Pharmacists.
Today we're going to discuss about professional development with you. So Ruth, can you tell me more about yourself?
Sure. So I mentioned that I was Senior Vice President at St. Barnabas. And so as Senior Vice President, I oversee not only pharmacy as Chief Pharmacy Officer for the health system, I also oversee the radiology department, laboratory services, food and nutrition, clinical nutrition, wound care, outpatient wound care, the outpatient pharmacy, the outpatient imaging center, and then both invasive and non-invasive cardiology.
Wow. Sounds like you have a very busy career. Just wondering, what are some of the challenges that you had, especially early in life, that made you such a great leader today?
So there's three things I probably want to tell you about. First, I'm a first generation college grad, right? So no one in my family actually went to college before I did it, in my family. Two, I started my working career at a very early age, the age of 15. That was a challenge. And then thirdly, when I started in college, I actually didn't start in pharmacy. I started it as a physician's assistant or a PA,
Wow.
and then I transitioned into pharmacy.
Wow, that's very interesting. So how did you end up in pharmacy?
So, well, that's an interesting story. So when I was actually at St. John's, I was in the PA program. There was a bunch of us friends together, and they closed the PA program, and so we had a certain number of credits. One of my friend's father was a pharmacist, and so we all decided that we would actually go into pharmacy. But that pivoting, into a new career in itself is a challenge, and gives you the ability to become a leader. Little things throughout your life, I would say the challenges that you face are little things that prepare you for a leadership role.
That's great.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
One of the other things I haven't mentioned on a personal level, I have a mother of 6 children, some things that I would say early in my career I probably wouldn't mention. But I have 4 boys and 2 girls, so that in itself prepares you for management.
Well, I think that is the best accomplishment that anybody can think of.
You must have amazing time management skills.
Yes, for sure.
So as a recent pharmacy grad who is now kind of looking at the world with big eyes, they have lots of worries like loans and other types of immediate goals. What were some of your goals right outside of graduating pharmacy school?
So right outside of pharmacy school, I think everyone has that challenge of generating revenue to cover loans and anything they're doing on a personal level. I actually received my license 1 week before my wedding. And so my goal, like everyone else, was to earn enough money for everything that you needed to do. 1, to cover your goals. 2, I was married now. I knew I wanted to get a house. And so it was getting yourself financially stable so that you could move on in your both professional and your personal careers. So for me, when I first started out, same thing, like you and everyone else, you want to earn as much money as you can. But years ago, you didn't earn the salaries that they earn now. And so one of the things I would say I would almost fell into was I had friends who were interested in getting into retail pharmacy or community-based practice. And so they asked if I wanted to join them as a partnership. And so that's exactly what we did. It was a little bit further. I had worked in a health system pharmacist for a number of years, but I would say it it was probably 3 years after I graduated that I actually opened my first store. And then a year after that, I opened the second. And within a year after that, I had the third. So we actually wound up with 3 retail pharmacies. 2 were in Queens, 1 all the way out in Deer Park, Long Island. And so there were 3 partners, so we each had our own store, so that we managed. And I carried the insurance for the family, and so I couldn't leave health system because that was your own store, your own business didn't have that kind of coverage. So one of the things I also did was I stayed in the health system, but I also ran a store out in Deer Park, Long Island. So that was a challenge.
That's challenging.
It was a lot of hours that I worked back then.
That's amazing, and you survived all of that.
Right, with that family.
Yeah. Wow. So I understand that. So in the beginning of your career, you certainly want to make enough money to support your family. But how has your goals changed throughout the years? And how often do you set new goals for yourself?
Goals change all the time for me, for sure. So I at least once a year, I write them down in my book, and I write down the goals because I feel that if you're really serious about a goal, you have to not only write it down, but you have to say it. And so I do that all the time. But sometimes you go back throughout the year, like I was just saying. I looked recently to see where I was. You check to see how far you've gone in your goals and whether you need to revise them or push them out a little further. So I would say I constantly look at the goals.
That's great. Now, you had mentioned about saying your goals out loud before. So what does that do by saying your goals out loud?
To me, it might seem funny, but I think when you say the goal out loud of what you want to accomplish, it kind of puts it out there in the world, in the universe, so to speak.
Right.
So one of my goals is to be a COO. So I've said it here, I've said it many times.
Mm-hmm.
So I say it to my bosses, I say it to the board of directors, so that they know my plan. And so I often say my goals out loud to somebody.
Well, that's great. Hey, listen, if people hear it often enough, they would say, okay, you got it, right? At some point.
Exactly.
That's
Pretty
wonderful.
inspiring. Yeah. So tell me about your role as a pharmacy entrepreneur.
One was definitely the retail pharmacies. I would say that was certainly the most entrepreneurial. Early on in my career, I was probably in my early 20s when I did that. But I had the stores for about 10 years, and I had now 4 children. So I said, okay, I think as a community-based practice pharmacy, it's a 24/7, not that any management job isn't, but you're always thinking about it. The other thing I think in a community-based practice is that you become very much a retailer, and you lose some of your profession because you're not so much focused on your actual profession of being a pharmacist. And so after my 4th child, I said, you make a lot of money, but I felt I didn't want to be a retailer anymore. I really wanted to get back to the hospital. And so I wound up selling. There were 3, we had 2 other partners. We wound up selling these stores, and we all came back to hospital pharmacy. And so then I think my goals changed completely. And so I then started to decide, well, where do I want to go in hospital practice? And so after being out of school now for close to 10 years, or more than 10 years, I went back and got my doctorate. And so and that was a challenge in itself. I was discouraged often, one because I had 4 children, and I was thinking about it. Now it was a year later because I had to wait to get back into hospital practice in a full-time position. So now I had 5 children, and I was thinking about going back to get my doctorate. And people were discouraging me. I said, 5 children, how are you going to do? So I wound up filling out all the paperwork, and it was in my first semester, I found out I was pregnant again with my sixth. And I said, boy, what do I do now? Do I continue on, or do I just give it up? So I was asking different people, what do I do? And they said, Ruthie, you're going to ever be less busy? And I said, no. They said, well, just do it. So I went on, and I was in a class. Actually, I had to drive out to Pennsylvania for these classes because it was a working pharmacy program, and they didn't have anything in New York at that time. So I had to drive out to Sesame Street Place. There was a hospital out there, and it's a challenge because I had the kids and I was pregnant. But there were 14 other working pharmacists in this program, and they all said, well, if she graduates, if she makes it through this program, we have no excuse.
Right.
And
you
so,
did.
And so we all graduated together, and it was great. It was great.
That's great. Yeah. Well, sounds like you were a go-getter. Have you always been a high achiever like that?
I would say yes. The things I had mentioned earlier, being a first generation person who went to college before anyone else, starting my career early, I would say that I always knew I had to keep moving. So if I wasn't having another child, I was advancing my career, and I knew I always wanted to continue moving, and I still continue moving. I would get bored if I stayed in the same thing for too long.
That's wonderful, and I can definitely relate to that because I'm also a first generation American. So I always knew that I better work, otherwise I would probably be sleeping on the street, and I didn't want to do that. So I can definitely relate. Do you have any goals outside of pharmacy?
Oh, definitely. So I would say my goals, I became a director of pharmacy in 2008. It was for the first time. And I said, I knew at that point, now I felt you're as high as you can be in pharmacy. What's your next step? Where do you want to go from here? And so I actually, back then I was at Bon Secours Health System, and so they had a New York market, so I became the system director over the New York market, which were 3 hospitals in New York State. And there, I did the formulary, I did a central PMT, I did all of that, but I knew I wanted to go beyond even being a system director. And so I went to the COO, who was my boss at the time, and I said, listen, I'd really like to start getting into administration and other departments. How do I do that? And what they would do, and funny, I find that they did that here when I came here as well in St. Barnabas, was they give you the challenging departments. So they were like, well, we have this department nobody really wants because, it's, people who worked there were difficult, or they didn't know, what to do with this department. So I wound up getting things like, that were completely off the rails. You would never think from pharmacy. I would have like the valet parking. I did the operators for a while. So departments that they had trouble with, that I would have to go in, completely learn, because it was completely different. It wasn't clinical at all, and it wasn't anything even near pharmacy. But then that helps you become a leader because you learn to problem solve at a completely different level. I think also you get to know people, right? You learn how people work. You have to learn the business of whatever that business is, and you then, once you see the issues and what they are, you have to build up the department. What you learn is you can't do that on your own. But you have to have the people at the front line to move the department forward. And so you build relationships constantly with these individuals, and you empower them to help move that department forward, so that you become more of the facilitator for these individuals. And so I think that defines leadership. It's not just, you don't lead, you facilitate. It's the individuals that actually wind up being the leaders. You just empower them to be better than they are.
That's great advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. And congratulations on your recent MBA. Can you tell us more about why you decided to do an MBA program?
So when I was at Bon Secours and I started to go into administration, I was trying to decide what additional degree should I get. And so I was advised at that time to go for a fellowship with the American College of Healthcare Executives. And that took about 3 years, and I had done that. And then I moved to Bon Secours shortly after. When I got here, now my goal, remember I said, I was telling everybody, was to be COO, right? Because I didn't get my goal out there.
And we all hear you.
So my boss at the time was the CMO, and he said, well, Ruth, if you want to be in operations for an entire hospital, you have the clinical side, but you don't have the business side. And I said, well, I have 3 pharmacies, right? I do have the business side. But he said, people, you would have to tell them that. You'd have to explain it. And he said, it's not part of your degrees that are after your name. And I said, okay. And I said, but, honestly, I didn't even know. I was like, what could it teach me? Because I own stores. I know how to do a budget. I know inventory. And he said, you'd be surprised. But he said, I think if you really want to be a COO, people need to see very evidently that you have that business behind you, that business degree. So now again, it was many years later, right? I think it was 2000. Yeah, it was over another 10 years. I had been out of school, and so when I did my PharmD program, we were on VHS. Right? They didn't even have Blackboard was just being started. Now everything was digital, right? And so I know how to do Excel, I know how to do Word, but to actually go on and do all your presentations and everything was online, Blackboard was online, that was a challenge in itself. But I signed up again. I looked through all the different programs, and the University of Texas was, West Texas A&M is the one I went with. And it was completely online. So my first semester, I think, was a real, you're completely out of your comfort zone. And one of the things I actually have here, one of the things that I say all the time, and so one of my managers gave it to me, is life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Wow.
And I believe that sincerely, that the only way that you continue to challenge yourself is to always live at that edge of your comfort zone. Because if you get too comfortable, you're not going to move on.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
So yeah.
And thank you so much for having Jamie and I here today. And we really enjoyed that tour that you gave us in the pharmacy today. Your pharmacy is beautiful.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your outpatient pharmacy? I was especially impressed by that.
So when that's kind of an interesting story as well. When I did my MBA, and toward the end you have to do a huge project, and they want you to use all the skills that they just taught you throughout your MBA, and they want you to either start a new business or start a program. And I knew instantly, because I had been talking about an outpatient pharmacy here at the hospital, opening one for a long time, but I could never convince the executives that this was something that we really should do for the institution. So when they asked me to do a project, I knew instantly I'm gonna do a project about opening an outpatient pharmacy, because one, it was my profession, it was easy to talk about, and two, I knew it was something that I wanted to do here. So it wound up being a 10-page business proposal, and it was specific to this hospital. It wound up getting an A, which was very good. Yeah.
What other grade would you have gotten?
But I took that and submitted that paper to my executive leadership. And it was at that point when they read that, because it had scenario analysis and all the budget was there about how much money you could make, they approved the pharmacy. And it was right after I graduated, actually. And so we started that whole build. COVID hit, but we just opened that outpatient pharmacy in January of 2021.
That's amazing.
And actually, in the by the fourth month, the projections and the revenue that it generated in the fourth month made up for the other 3 months, and it has consistently been way over projection. So it's been a huge success for the institution, which is great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great to have that vision come true.
Yeah.
Plus, it was your foundation looking at 3 pharmacies, and now it's really grown through.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun, definitely interesting, and something that I had always wanted to do.
That's great.
I think one of the other things here for this institution was the residency program. When I came to the institution, they didn't have a residency program or any much clinical, I would say, here. And building that whole program and seeing that actually, now we just went through our first, for our PG criteria, we went through our accreditation, is another success story, and another, that's something that I just love to do and have always wanted to do.
That's great. Well, you have worn many hats as a pharmacist, and you are very successful as an administrator, and we're definitely so lucky to have you as our president in the New York State Council of Health System Pharmacists.
Thank you.
So what are some of your goals for this year?
As president?
Yes.
Oh, well, so COVID was a challenge for us, without a doubt. And so at the state level, we suffered membership and we suffered revenue. So the 2 main goals for me is to increase our membership for a number of reasons. Also revenue. One, the state has to get back on track. But the theme that I selected for this year was advancing pharmacy, and together we can do great things. I think that on my platform when I wanted to be president, I had said that the one thing that was near and dear to my heart was to move this state forward and the pharmacists forward as a profession and pharmacists as providers. So in order to do that, we have to have one voice, and I said that even in my speech as a president, that we all have to work together across the entire state, and that is something that we have to do. And in order for that to happen, we have to build relationships. Downstate needs to know upstate. Community-based practice needs to know hospital practice. We all have to find common ground, but we all have to do our job. Right? Everyone has to work together to move that needle forward. So those are 2 main goals. Membership. I need every pharmacist at every health system to be a member of the New York State Council because that's critical. That will help generate the revenue, not just the membership, but when you start that ball rolling, people get engaged, vendors become engaged, and other professionals become engaged, and you start to roll that ball a little faster, and it becomes stronger. So that's key. I would think then the last goal is really the provider status. Now, you question, can you get that done, right? I've heard, we've tried, everybody's tried, and I understand the challenges, but we have to keep trying.
That's right.
We have to keep trying. Because other states have done it, right? They're not many, right? California, Ohio. But New York has historically lagged behind. And I don't want that for New York, right? We have some incredibly intelligent individuals, incredibly intelligent pharmacists. We should be the leaders. We should be the leaders that are moving this profession forward. And so that's what I want for the state.
Yeah.
Now, it's a big, lofty goal.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm living at the end of my comfort zone. And probably I'll be having everyone live at the edge of their comfort zone.
Right.
But I think together, and I mean that sincerely, we can do great things. And so that's why I came up with that theme as well.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And there was one thing that you said about engagement. I also think that it's very important for us to keep all our members engaged so that they feel like they belong to this organization and they want to be a part of our organization. Now, I know that Jamie, our president from the New York City chapter, is extremely excellent at engaging members. Maybe Jamie can talk to us about how you are so successful in engaging our members.
Oh, thank you, Angela. I think we have a lot of goals in the New York State chapter, and I think one thing that has helped us is dividing up and conquering. So we create committee chairs, we create committees, and then we have chairs who we appoint, and those committee chairs are super, like just a big wealth of knowledge, and they're very inspired to make changes for themselves and for others. So I think by empowering and creating a team, we can do great things this year.
Yeah, that is so true. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, we hope that you will join us on our future videos. Thank you.